And welcome back to the Ultra Running Guys. We got Jeremy Reynolds and Jeff Winchester of the Ultra Running Guys. And the reason that we're here is to help you take your next step in your ultra running journey. And often a big part of figuring out what that next step is figuring out what is going to go on your race calendar. So we started this race spotlight series where we talk to the people who know best, the race directors themselves, and get you the information you need to know if this is the race for you. And this one we're super excited about because we have a previous guest that is also the race director. So Jeff, tell us who we are talking to and what we're talking about.
I bet they're going to be able to figure it out real quick. Particularly when I say this, for ultra runners that are history buffs, this race is the perfect combo. It's a race event that has a 50-mile and a 100-mile option that allows runners to travel back in time to run along a portion of the historic Pony Express Trail. The race takes place in western Utah along a course that is very remote, and it's a 100% dirt road and only has about 3,000 feet of elevation gain and loss. Runners have 30 hours to complete the 100-miler. Unless you are 60 and over, then you get 32 hours to complete it. And if you want to learn about history, the race director has put together a history packet for you that he sends out to runners as well. And who better to host a race that takes runners along a journey back in time than the ultra running historian himself, Mr. Davy Crockett, the race director. So Davy Crockett, welcome back to the Ultrarunning Guys podcast.
Oh, it's great to have for you to have me again.
Look, we're super excited. So we're talking about the Pony Express Trail 100, and there's also a 50-mile event. But like we mentioned, I mean, you are the guy. In fact, when we had you on the first time, you mentioned this, and it was kind of the light bulb that was like, hey, I think that this would be a good thing. If you're listening and you don't know Davey and his work, go check out Ultrarunning History Podcast. I'm telling you, it's fascinating. You will go down a rabbit hole and you will learn more than you ever thought you could know. But Davey, the purpose, obviously, of this episode is if somebody's listening, what do they need to know about your race? So we're going to get into the kind of the logistical part of it. But one of the things that we love to know first, as the race director, what is your favorite thing about the Pony Express 100?
Well, the connection to history. I mean, that's what really got us started when I would, I just went and did an adventure run one day, and the Pony Express Trail runs only about 3 miles from my house. I never really even tried to drive it before. So I just ran out about 30 miles, had my wife pick me up, and I was just thrilled with the feeling, only 30 miles is away from all civilization. I can see any structures. It just felt like I was connected to history. I even found a telegraph pole stump. So a lot of history out there. That's the big connection there, is it makes you feel like you're out there with your ancestors.
That's fantastic. So how long has this race going on? How long has the race been taking place? Not necessarily how long is the Pony Trail been taking place?
It tickles from Missouri to California. But no, we started in 2006. We did a winter version, if you can believe it, that first year, in December 29th, I think it was, and held it a couple times the next year. So this will be our 19th running this year.
Wow. So obviously it's on a historical place. The race has history. What sets it apart? I mean, obviously we're going to talk about the history, right? But tell us, so if we show up, what do we see? What's the trail like? Like, what should the runners know about what sets the Pony Express apart?
Well, it's out in the West Desert, so you gotta be, it's a stark difference than your mountain ultras trails. But it is the desert has a certain beauty to it. It's very flat, very fast, all dirt. And it's a great place for a lot of first timers, I think, especially our 50-mile race. I'd say 3/4 had never run an ultra before and come out to try it. But the big difference from our race from others is that crews are required to drive along. And the reason is there's just one road out there. It's very remote, and it would have been impossible to have aid stations where people are going back and forth in cars. So we have a format very similar to Badwater, where you have your family and friends just driving along with you, and they experience all the highs and lows that you have. And I'd say for most of the runners, for the very first time, their family and friends experience an ultra with them, and they're extremely surprised and mostly delighted about the experience.
So, just out of curiosity, then, and I do know a little bit about this because I looked at the race itself on the race details on the website. But to have all your runners start at the beginning and all their crews in their cars start, how do you accomplish this logistically in order to get the race to begin with that many runners and cars theoretically that are going to have to go down this single road?
Yeah. So the cars are always heading in the same direction. We tell them they cannot be going back and forth until they're finished. So, but we stage them. So we start them every half an hour, and I start the slowest runners earliest and the fastest latest. So during like a 2.5 hour period, they're staggered out, and they eventually converge pretty closely around 30 miles on a stretch there. But then it's very manageable once they're out there that far. But it's a thing to see all these crew cars parked the same way across or on the side of the road as their runners are running down the road, and seeing all the smiles of everybody is just a great thing to see.
And if you're listening or watching, I would say go check out the website to appreciate, because there's pictures out there. And so while I haven't spent a whole lot of time in Utah, I grew up and did a lot of traveling in Arizona. And when I saw some of those pictures, it reminded me there was times driving across Arizona where you'd come around a turn or you come over a hill, and it's straight for pretty much as far as you could see. And we would take bets on, hey, is it 14 miles? Is it 15 miles to that next turn or something like that, right? And so that's what some of those pictures reminded me of, just this landscape that rolls out in front of you. So I can only imagine the cars and the runners. So check out those pictures. But let me ask this, because I'm thinking about, hey, my crew going along with me. Obviously, most of it's remote. Are there any towns? Is there anything along the way, or is it really self-sufficient for the entirety of the race for both the runners and the crews?
There's really nothing. I mean, the 100-milers go out to what's called the Fish Springs National Wildlife Refuge. So out there, they do have some facilities, actually internet and everything out there. It's an amazing place where there's pools of water that stay about 70 degrees year round. So it's a refuge for ducks and all the wildlife out there. So we take the 100-milers all the way out there, and then they come back. But we emphasize that they should kind of fill up their gas tanks before they come out here. I usually bring some gallons just in case, but they get the message. I don't think we've ever had anybody run out of gas, but we've had a lot of flat tires.
And that was another tip we saw, right? Is make sure you know how to change a tire. But I think that's excellent for people to know, right? It's not along the way, hey, we're going to stop in at the 7-Eleven and resupply. So I'm sure, knowing you, anybody that's going to be running a race is going to have more than enough information to prepare for this. But I just think it's good for people to kind of mentally, if they're listening to this, going, okay, hey, this sounds like an adventure I can go on with my crew, but it is going to be me and my crew, right? And we're going to kind of do this. One of the things you mentioned is this is a great first time race. In fact, a lot of your runners are first timers. What do you think that people could possibly underestimate about this race as they're showing up? What do you want them to know?
The big underestimation is how flat it is. So we've had quite a few mountain ultra runners come and try it, and it's just surprising how many of them DNF. If they haven't trained to keep a steady pace on a flat surface, their quads seize up. And so I'm pretty shocked sometimes, just very talented runners who just can't make it. And so surprisingly, our 100-mile finish rate is only between 60 to 70%. And probably the main reason for that is the mental aspect of it. You have your comfortable car just within reaching distance, usually the whole way, versus, a very remote mountain ultra where you have to go between aid stations. And but by the time, you're thinking about dropping out, by the time you reach the aid station, you change your mind. But if you have a car with you, well, it's very easy to, when things get bad, to say, let's just drive home. So the finish rate is rather low, but it's usually always great weather. We've never had rain in the 19 or the 18 times we've had it. It's kind of weird. Never rained, and the temperatures usually go up to the 70s. Usually the start is a little cold, close to freezing, but it's usually very pleasant weather for running.
So tell me about this car deal again. So
Yeah,
you got these car. I know the cars leapfrog the runners, that they go about every 2 to 3 miles, which I think there's an aspect of that would probably be helpful, because when we did look at the pictures, like you described it, if you look down a road and you can't tell if it's going to be 10 to 20 to 30 miles long, whatever your eyes can, to the horizon is what the road appears. You have this, it's not like in a normal run, you're like, I'm going to run to the next tree, or I'm going to run to the next bench, or whatever it is. I'm going to run until the road finally ends, apparently. But at least you have a car every 2 to 3 miles. So what are the rules, though, for me as a runner when I get to my car? Obviously, I don't think cars, since you described on the website that cars have to leapfrog, it doesn't mean that a car can drive beside me and hand me something to drink out the window as they're driving and running by. But when I get to the car, is there rules on the car about, can I get in the car? Can I take a seat? Can I take a nap in the car? Can I go on a drive?
Oh yeah, you can do everything. Now I've run it 7 times, finished the 100 miles 7 times, won it a few times, and I tell you, some years coming back in the night, it would get so cold. There's some pockets of cold air where it's like an inversion where it gets below freezing sometimes, and I would sometimes at night, get so tired, and I'd tell my crew, just go a mile, only a mile. And then I'd run a mile, get to the car and jump in and get the heat going and take a couple minutes to warm up and then continue on. Or I've in heat times, I've even used air conditioning, and jumped in to try to cool my whole body down. As long as the car's not traveling. And we have caught cheaters. But that's the idea, is you want to do it all on your own.
And so is there, from a crew standpoint, are any rules? Do they have to stay within a certain distance, or is it just kind of whatever works for the runner and the crew?
Yeah, whatever works. I mean,
Okay.
when I would run it, I would usually, the first 8 miles, I really didn't need them at all. Although I tell them, okay, go 4 miles. And then usually I just wave to them, and they'd go on, and I usually get a 4 miles usually worked, and then coming back typically about 3 miles. But it's all up to them, whatever they want to do. Now some crews share for multiple runners, and so we have strict rules that those runners have to stick together. We've had problems where a runner is a lot faster than the other runner. They're sharing a crew, and the runner gets out 10 miles ahead of the other runner, and then you get in problems where you go maybe a couple hours before they can crew. So we tell them that they have to stay within a minimum 4 miles within each other, but most of them stay together.
Okay. Yeah, because I was thinking from you mentioned the mental aspect of having a car right there, and I was immediately thinking, okay, I would try to tell my crew, don't stay too close, right? Don't be so readily available that I can just be like, okay, I'm done. So if you're listening, you're thinking about that, maybe just what's your strategy with your crew, so that yes, they're helping, but they're not always the immediate bailout option.
Yeah, in the pre-race briefing, we have a pre-race briefing with the crews right after their runners start to let the runners kind of get down the road before the cars come. And I kind of joke with the crew, says, hey, when your runner wants to quit, lock the doors. Do everything you can to try to keep them going unless they're truly injured. So So, some take that advice and keep going.
Lock the doors and just throw things out the window.
I want to be a driver for a crew. And I can do this for you as well. And then when you get close, I'm just going to start going a little bit more. Every time you get close, I'll just start going a little bit further. Like, no, come on, catch me.
Yeah, I mean, funny things have happened. When I would run, I'd always worry if my crew wouldn't start driving past me. I would think, wow, did they lock their keys in the car, or are they gonna? Am I ever going to see them again? Well, one year. One guy did lock his keys in the car and had to break his window to keep on going. So
yikes. Well, and so I had one other thought, because normally I am not a treadmill person, right? I run on a treadmill if I have to. But two of the aspects that you're talking about: one, we've got a flat course, and two, like I mentioned, and maybe that's not the whole course, but from the pictures, it looks like a big landscape. And we talked to another race where they said, hey, in that case, it was a lighthouse, right? But you can see this lighthouse for 15 miles away, and it can be mentally draining because it feels like it's just never getting closer, right? And so I would imagine there's some of that. So in my head, I was like, oh, treadmill will be the perfect thing. My scenery is not changing. It's nice and flat. But do you have any training recommendations, or is there anything to talk to there? There's somebody's listening that you're like, yeah, get used to these things.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, treadmills are good. Mental aspects. It's really doing a lot of flat running. I mean, we do have a hill. We have a hill we have to climb up over 1,000 feet, and it has one switchback, So we have a rule: you can't cut the switchback. So it is a nice hill. Once you've run about almost 40 miles of flats, you get to climb up over a pass, and then have a nice steady downhill to the finish of the 50 mile, which is great. But the mental aspect is we do have a long straight road of about 14 miles that you can see across a long valley. And at night, it's just bizarre, because as you're coming back, you can see the car lights of crews behind you or their headlamps. And it's just extremely hard to distinguish if a runner's coming up on you. I would always panic. I'd look back and I'd see these lights. I swear they were headlamps, but they were actually car headlights 10 miles away. You could not distinguish between the two. So it really works on your mind whether somebody's catching it. But that's what's fun, is you can see where your competition is a lot of times, especially if they're leapfrogging in a pattern. You can kind of do that. One year, I caught up to a guy because I told my crew car we were going to run without lights, or I was going to run without my light, so he couldn't see me catching up to him. And lo and behold, I caught up to him and flashed on my light, and he just was in shock. And so, and I went on to win that year. That was Ed the Jester, who's finished more 100-mile races than anybody. And we had a fun time that year.
I love that story, because I know that after that, you're like, I outsmarted him.
Yeah, I did. And then I'd have my crew kind of hang back, see where he was, drive up to me and tell me how far he was. So I would be able to stretch my lead, a mile, 2 miles, 3 miles. And then I knew I kind of had the win after that.
Ed the Jester. I would start calling you Davy the Ninja after that.
Now, Davy, see, we had you on the show before, and I was like, this is a great guy. He's a historian. He's just values the sport so much, and we never got the spirit of how competitive you actually are. And now I realize there's a little bit of like ninja, like you said.
Yeah.
When you say too competitive, is there such a thing?
I don't know. So all my ultras, I wanted to do well. I wasn't just out there for fun of it. I really did want to do well and try to. I mean, I loved running at night when you could see somebody ahead of me. And the few times I had pacers, I don't run with a lot of pacers, but I would have some of my good buddies pace me, and they knew how to get me running fast, because they would say, "Hey, see that guy a half a mile ahead of us with his lights on. Let's go catch him. And I go, oh yeah, let's go do it. and it'd wake me up, and just had a competitive time during nights to try to catch people.
Hope everybody's listening. The strategic headlamp, the strategic way to use your crew to know where your competition's at.
You don't have a choice, because if it's a trail run or if it's in the mountains or something, you can hide around the next turn. Like, this is a straight road in lots of spots and stuff, and so you're visible.
Well, the first thing that came to mind, whether it's true or not, but in Born to Run, you hear about Marshall Ulrich having his crew tape over the tail lights so people think they're getting further and further away. Those types of games, and I was like, Davy's in this. Davy's got the strategy down. And now, one thing we talked about, kind of the scenery. I would imagine. Tell me if I'm right or wrong. I would imagine that you probably see some amazing sunrises and sunsets out there with the expansiveness.
We do, and especially full moon. If we get a full moon year, it is just amazing. But then we'll have some years where there's no moon, and then the stars just explode. I mean, you don't have there's no trees out there. There's nothing to get in the way of the stars. So yeah, you see the sunrise, sunsets, the moon rises, the moon sunsets. Sometimes the moon sets over those fish springs pools and make reflections, and it's just a amazing experience out in the desert.
That's awesome. Just a quick note: the race does start on a Friday, which is different than other races. Most races start on Saturday, but this starts on a Friday. And I actually read that many races in Utah start on Fridays as opposed to Saturday, and the reason for that is some of it religious. The dominant church out there, people go to church on Sundays, so to try to get help, it makes it easier to do it a Friday, Saturday. Yep, that's what I was saying, is that for the races, that in order to get volunteers, the best time for them to start the race is Fridays. And a lot of the younger folks, younger kids, I think even for the families, are off on Fridays as well.
Yeah, so we schedule our race where most of the school districts are having their fall break. So I purposely do that so we can get a lot of kids. And usually there's a lot of kids. So while we average probably lately around 70 runners, we probably have out there a total of 300 to 400 people when you count all their crew along. Sometimes people even bring double cars to crew to fit all the family. And it's pretty amazing who comes out there.
And that's what I like about it. And so the way they have structured, and that's why I brought it up, right? It's because I knew a little bit maybe on this, but I brought it up because that's one of the perks of how you've set this up, is so that the families that want to participate, it's not going to be an inconvenience. They're not going to be missing school. They're not going to be missing any kind of other activities if they're residents in that area, right? And so they can all be a part of that race experience with them throughout the entire event, as well as any volunteers who want to come out.
And what's really interesting is the reaction of these families. Some of them come out there kind of grumbling, like, gee, I don't really want to do this for my husband, or, oh gosh, my dad's making me do this. But then at the end, there's usually a complete turnaround. And some of these grumblers are saying, I'm going to come and do it next year. So, because they have such a great experience and have experienced an ultra for the first time in their life.
I like that.
Yeah. And that shared experience always just creates such a bond. And so I think that's super cool for a family. Something else, intended or not, Jason Green with Yeti, when we talked with him, he'll start on a Friday as well. And part of it being so that you don't have the dangerous rush to try to get home after 100-mile on a Sunday. So if you're thinking about this, starting on Friday also gives you Sunday to do some traveling. So I think if I'm traveling with my family, that's another great aspect.
Agreed.
One thing I do want
to, and kind of when I started it, I wanted to be back at work on Mondays, so it worked for me to be able to have Sunday to recover, and not have to take a sick day all the time.
I think it's great.
Well, one thing I do want to touch on, because you mentioned it, and so again, flat, open, no trees, no shade, right? So what do people need to be prepared for there? It's in October. You mentioned the temperatures, but still exposed. So I would imagine people need to probably dress a little bit different than they would if they were in the mountains or tree cover, something like that.
All right. So in the mornings, it's cool. Everybody's, all bundled up. By an hour after sunrise, they're taking everything off, But for the rookies, I really have to emphasize electrolyte replacement, taking in the salt, because we've never had any serious medical problems at all. But when we have had people struggle, especially at the 50-mile finish, and I start asking them, I find out that they haven't been they've been drinking straight water or just Gatorade or something like that, haven't been doing electrolyte replacement very good. So then I have to play medic for a couple hours to try to get these people to recover, and they do. But that's probably the biggest thing. We give bandanas for everybody because on very dry years, there can be quite a bit of dust. It depends on the way the wind blows. If it's a side wind, that's great. But boy, if the wind's kind of coming towards us, if a car goes by, there's a giant dust cloud that runners have to run through. So I have to take care with the dust. We're usually pretty lucky that it's blowing away from us.
I would imagine hat, sunglasses, those types of items probably very helpful.
Oh, yeah.
Good deal. Well, okay. So now people have listened. If this is their cup of tea, they're like, okay, how do I sign up? You're on Ultra Sign Up, but a couple questions. Are there any qualifications needed? Do they need to qualify to run the 100? And do you have like max participation? Is there a risk of selling out?
No qualification. We have 100 max. We've never sold out. We've come close at times, but never have. So usually you can make up your mind a little bit. Trying to remember, did that cover that question?
I think so. Yeah. So no, you don't have to qualify for the 100. I just want to make sure that part's clear, right? So
no, that, I warn them, if I see a lot of rookies, I start them really early and make sure that they have enough time. It's a 30-mile or 30-hour cutoff. So that can be kind of challenging for some of the new runners. So we have some cutoff times along the course to make sure that they don't get too far behind, and we do pull them. If they get to a certain point and we've never had anybody finish, past that point, we let them know, and we tell them it's time for you to quit. But most of them can make it if they just keep their pace going. We do have at the 50-mile finish, we have a huge barbecue. So we really have one aid station, but it's like a big party out there. And the 100-milers pass it twice. But kind of that's a good place too. We can gauge how runners are doing, and we put on an Argentine barbecue and have a lot of fun.
Ooh. Now, because I would imagine that would be a temptation. If you're signed up for the 100 and you drop at the 50 to hang out at the barbecue, do you get a 50-mile finish, or is it a DNF for the 100?
It's a DNF.
All right. Yeah. It's good to clarify.
No, I'm one of these that think that's a poor practice that helps people mentally take the easy way out. Javelina used to do that years ago. I don't know if they still do. And I would hear people at the aid station saying, "Hey, if we get to the 100K, we still get a buckhole. Let's maybe we should quit." I don't like that. Once I did have a guy who was a 100-miler, and he made it to the 50. And after the race, he emailed me. He says, You need to put me in the 50-mile results because I've never had a DNF. I can't stain my record.
Should have kept going after your barbecue then.
That's right. I told him, sorry about that. Should have kept going.
I mean, I think that's fine. I mean, I know that you're right. There are some races who have the option that they can drop down, but they clearly say that in the beginning, like when they sign up, and
right.
Your race does the same. Like you clearly say that if you drop down, that it's a DNF, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think the race directors have that privilege and that luxury to choose that option, and so I agree. And we've had races where we've spotlighted that, allow that drop down. And one of the things we talk about in those examples is how hard it is for runners to continue past for that, because they know that they can drop down. And the race directors acknowledge that they say that, yeah, that is a obstacle for a lot of runners as well. And so depending on if that's a risk for you, like if you're looking to do a 100-miler and you know that your tendency is that I may drop down, then probably sign up for a race that doesn't allow you to do that. So you will get the DNF if you're trying to avoid that. So but it's one of those things that just depends on the preference of the runner, but also it's up to the race director and the type of race they want to have. So I agree with that. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just saying, when we talked to Laz, remember, he called those types of things a cruelty. A cruelty, because then you always have to wonder, but what if, right? So
it's true.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to go to this last question. And so, Davey, what does it mean to you to have runners run your race?
I think the big thing is sharing the experience. Like I said, I started this as just a wonderful adventure run that I fell in love with. I never thought I would be a race director. In fact, the first few years, I just started it as a race where they didn't have to pay anything, and tried to get as many as my friends out to come and run it and experience that and develop that love for the West Desert. So what makes me happy is seeing all the smiles of people at the finish, taking photos with the crews, and them talking about coming back next year, and watching the sunset, and having a love for the desert.
I like it.
So good. And Davey, one of the things, I mean, we said it when you're on, you are an absolute kind of gem for the sport. The way you pour your heart and soul, and the way you're documenting everything. But now you've got a race where you're educating people along the way. And, one of the questions I didn't ask was probably, and I shouldn't even say it, but what was your personal favorite piece of history? But we'll leave that for the runners, right? Because you're going to send out, you have a document that tells them. One of the things I remember about JFK when we ran that was knowing how much history there was along this, and you were providing that, for runners in this race. So if this is your first time plugging in, I'll just say thank you so much for taking the time, for listening. If you're new to us, we do have the regular podcast. Please go check that out. If you're back, your family, we know, that we love you, and please do all the normal stuff. If you're finding the value, share, subscribe, tell your friends, all that. But Davey, we'll make sure all the links are down below so people can get to you and all your stuff. But just thank you so much for taking the time to talk about the Pony Express with us.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's great to talk about it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, like I said, the links will be there. Our motto is just show up. So make sure you do that. Go sign up for the Pony Express, and we will talk soon. Cut.
Thanks so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed the content. If you haven't already, don't forget to check out our full lineup of podcast episodes that are designed to help you take your next step in your ultra running journey.
So be sure to check the links below, and you can visit our website at theultrarunningsguys.com, or download your episodes on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And remember, when in doubt, just show up.
See ya.